We're good. We are good. Hi, hey, cheers. Welcome to Wine and Wealth. It's so nice to see you again. It's been a while.
I mean, you can tell from the wine we just poured on the floor.
Yeah, sorry. We've just had a little wine accident here, but we've got a fantastic backstage crew helping us out. So we've started
professional.
Yeah, we've started off the night on a bang, but welcome to Wine and Wealth. We're Nat Kristen, and we co-founded a company called Hatch. Thanks so much for joining us. We care really deeply about Kiwis building meaningful wealth, and that just means we want everyone to be able to kind of hatch their tomorrow. And whatever your goals are, however big or small or conservative or bold they are, we just want you to be able to achieve them. That's really important to us. So that's why we did it, eh?
That is why we did it.
And it's why we're here as well, because we wanted a really relaxed format to be able to talk about money. And so Wine and Wealth isn't for everyone, but for those of you who are here, it is for you, and we welcome you. And it's so awesome to see you. But we do
which, by the way, we can't see you. It's really weird talking to ourselves.
No, however, I'm going to invite people to participate. What you can do is you can comment. You can ask questions. You can participate in this Wine and Wealth webinar, and we will answer and say
that's
hi.
How we know someone's watching. That's
yeah. So legal stuff. We can't give advice. We're not advisors. And so what we generally chat about with Wine and Wealth is just generally really healthy money tips that are well known, backed by lots of great experts. And so we're just sharing insights that are very well known and for your financial well-being.
Helping people get the information they need to make their own choices is the goal. We shouldn't be making choices for you. You should be making for themselves. But we're helping you sort of take a shortcut to sort of starting in on this information.
Exactly. So if we do mention specific companies or funds, we try not to, but if we do, they're only for an example. It's not to go out and invest in them. Same thing with an index. We just use it as kind of illustrative purposes. So legal stuff out of the way. Actually, the last thing is that share markets, look, they're risky. And what risk means is that it's the potential for something that you've invested in for its value to drop. So like what you possibly you wake up and one day the value of something that was yesterday has, dropped significantly today. And that's just risk. It was a high risk investment.
Which anyone who's bought a car before knows the idea of your car depreciating over time. The difference is that with investments and share markets is they also often have the opportunity to
go
retain their value. Unlike a lot of secondhand cars.
Yeah, true. Good analogy. But yeah, look, share markets, because they are higher risk than if you were to compare it to a savings account, most of our investors have their investments in Hatch for at least 3 to 5 years, if not much longer, some for over 20 years. And that's really how we look about investing, is that you want to be able to ride out the bumps over a long time period.
And also just quick fun fact on that, I think our first investors on Hatch are almost hitting their 5-year Hatch anniversary.
True.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So tonight's theme is about how to build a share portfolio. What are we talking about?
So we often have people, we spend a lot of time talking to people about making that first step and making that first investment and taking that $50 or $100 and treating it as an education. And then the next common question we get after that is, okay, I've done that. What next? So we know that knowledge is power, like we were just talking about, that it is not our job, nor should it be, to tell you what to invest in, but for you to have the power in your hands and sort of arming yourself with the information you need to make good decisions. So what we're going to do tonight is tackle a couple of approaches to building your share portfolio, from really simple set and forget to hands-on, from diversification to putting all your eggs in a couple of baskets. And our hope by the end of the night, and we would love for you to comment and email us after, is to leave you with the confidence to carry on. I read this great quote recently. I love sharing quotes, but you would never expect to start running, which, by the way, I did today. Went for a run today. Humble brag.
We always get to hear about when Nat runs.
Yep. It's probably only just before a webinar, so I can talk about it on the webinar. But you wouldn't expect to go for your first run and run a marathon. And I think the only advice that we'd ever give out tonight is that you shouldn't expect to start investing and be an expert. And it's a continuous journey that should actually be quite fun. It should become pretty much a hobby. So this is very much to arm you with the second, third, fourth steps to try and give you that information. Please participate. Comment throughout, and that's how we can kind of tailor what we're talking about to make sure it's the most valuable and interesting as much as we can.
Love it. So I've made my first investment. Now what? But before we get to that, we just want to thank this amazing Kiwi, our favorite Kiwi winery behind the wine that we're drinking, Morisco Vineyards, and behind our favorite drop, the Ned. And so, I am enjoying the Ned Chardonnay tonight, and Nat is drinking the Pinot Noir,
I've got the Pinot Noir.
which is pretty fab. And
it's pretty nice.
Yeah, it is pretty nice. Now talk about it.
Yeah, okay, so there's a few things that those who follow Hatch on Instagram may have noticed that Wine and Wealth has gone through a little bit of a revamp. We started this, like you said, it was a bit of a passion project for Kristen and I to just sort of connect with people and talk to people like us and talk with people like us. And what we've done, we've got now this extraordinary team at Hatch who've gone through a bit of a revamp to give you a lot more benefits. One of the weird side effects is now we've gone from sort of sitting talking to a laptop to now being surrounded by lights, and we've got microphones, and sadly this is probably the best either of us is ever going to look, which looking at myself now I'm like slightly concerned. But part of the benefits of joining this revamped Wine and Wealth community is obviously listening to us, but another great perk is that we want to sort of gather some cool partners who think like us that wealth should be just part of your life,
part of conversation,
something you talk about. It should be part of your lives, not this like boring chore that all of us put off. And Morisco were very kind, probably almost a year ago, to be the first to the party. And we weren't as organized back then. But what they've done is stood by us, which is pretty cool. And they've kicked things off, and they've done this for the last couple of webinars with an exclusive VIP offer for anyone who has subscribed to the Wine and Wealth community. Obviously, provided you're 18 or over.
Of course. So, look, if you're not subscribed, head on over to Wine and Wealth and subscribe, and you will get an email with an exclusive discount so that you can order your own case of Ned. It's cold. It's frigging cold. I swear it must have been the coldest day of the year.
I know. Amazing that I went for a run.
Yeah, it's great. So it's nice to have a drop, in the cupboard when you need it.
Absolutely. And it's free to subscribe to Wine and Wealth, and we're hoping there's plenty more to come.
Yeah.
But on the topic of wine,
yes.
I know Paddy Gower's just done his documentary. I don't know if anyone's watched it. Put it in the comments what you thought. But this is the first time you've actually had alcoholic wine in a while. Like normally when we hang out, you're on the beers.
No, I feel like the last time it was like dry January, and we did a Wine and Wealth, and I had to break my dry
seal. And recently you've been on the 50% of the supermarket now seems to be an alcohol-free beers and stuff.
Yeah.
So how was it?
Well, I was doing dry until July.
Semi-dry
until July, but anything for Wine and Wealth, and that's just because I don't know why, because I just
get nice.
Yeah. But also, and there are some really great non-alcoholic beverages, like 0% beer in my fridge right now. It's really great.
Yeah,
it's fine.
My sister had 0% gin while she was pregnant until she got morning sickness when she had it, and then she couldn't face it again.
I don't know. I'm not sold. But cheers to Morisco and the Ned. Thank you.
It is a nice drop.
Yeah. So we have to talk about the markets before we jump into kind of what's next, because the markets are crazy. Anyone's following. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster. So let's first talk about it's what you would consider a bear market. What's that?
It has been a roller coaster. A bear market. I love this fact, and I've now heard a couple of other things, a couple of other descriptions. But the reason it's called a bear market is kind of cool. I love animal analogies. I love the idea that the finance industry is based on all sorts of weird stuff. But basically, it's because bears fight by clawing down. So it's a bear market because they're fighting by clawing down, whereas bulls use their horns to fight up. And I just think that's kind of a fun thing. But it's a bit of a perfect storm, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but so the bear market's what, 20% down the market has to drop.
I think it's over a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and so the markets have dropped.
I'm in my animal analogy.
It has to drop about 20%, which has happened before it is the clawdown bear, which it is. And it is, if you think there's so much going on in the world, we've got a conflict, a terrible war happening in Europe. Obviously, we have rising fuel prices. If you've got 2 vehicles, you'll be feeling the pain. Possibly dropping to 1, possibly walking a lot more.
Maybe going at electric vehicles.
Yeah,
my sister an electric vehicle because she weighed up the different costs.
Okay. Big upfront costs, not sure yet, but look, supply chain issues we've got from the pandemic. We know that the world is kind of particularly in Asia, stopped manufacturing, shipping ports have been closed. So we've got all sorts of supply chain issues. But if you remember, governments have been doling out trillions of cash, and even here in New Zealand. So that is to help people in the pandemic. But what happens is a little bit of a domino effect out of that. So we've got so much cash floating around, and we're spend because it's been a pretty,
and it was an intentional thing from governments
to get us through the pandemic.
I mean, we've had lockdowns, people have been laid off, and so the governments were doing a good thing, and pumping money
paying
in.
our mortgages if we were off work during that period. And so then what happens is you've got like too much cash equals rising cost of living, and which is otherwise known as inflation. So everything, and you will have noticed on your latest grocery bill, in addition to fuel, is inflation. And so then what the central banks and governments do is they increase interest rates to keep inflation down. But what that means is,
and just to connect those dots, interest rates rise to suck money back out of the economy. The higher interest rates go, the more people want to put their money in savings because it makes more sense, and the harder it is to borrow money because it's too expensive.
But
so they do this delicate dance all the time, on and off. And we knew a couple of years ago when COVID really hit that this was going to be one of the consequences.
So it is really a domino effect. Like I think we're looking at, we're just rolled off, unfortunately, I think our fixed rate for our mortgage, and it's automatically doubling. So, you will
not be alone in that.
No, I won't be alone, but it is. So then what happens is the share markets hate interest rates going up because it means, possible doubts of future growth for businesses. It's more expensive to borrow money. Everything's generally just kind of go.
Yeah. So the reason for that is there is that another domino effect. If costs rise for businesses too, and their profits generally take a hit for a while, at least. Also, they don't have as much access to money because that's got a lot more expensive to borrow. So share markets hate, like investors. I always think when people talk about, what is it?
The share
rational markets. It's humans going, this feels a bit uncertain. I'm going to take cash
demand
out. For shares dries up a little bit. It lowers because people go, oh, I don't know what's happening. And when we all know the basics of supply and demand, when demand drops, so do prices.
Yeah. So it has been quite the time in the market. So how's your portfolio gone? How are you feeling?
Well, I actually was feeling a little bit stressed out, to be honest. I feel like it's been a long time. The last time we were in a situation like this was probably back in 2008, 2007, 2008. I was a lot younger. I had no money. So the only thing I remember happening was sort of worrying about keeping my business running. So I thought, I've been actually thinking about this a lot in the last couple of days, what has changed my tune? And I think I've got 3 things that I did. The first thing I did is stop watching the news. Like I noticed I was going down the rabbit hole on Instagram and going to The Guardian and going to stuff and just seeing doom and gloom. And instead I switched to watching Netflix. And because it's for me, it's a thing. I notice my pulse rising when I feel like I just noticed that when you watch the news, you start to feel more stressed. You buy into it. And instead I watched the J-Lo documentary, which I highly recommend.
Okay.
She is a queen. She is amazing. Everyone should watch it. Get away from your share portfolios and watch J-Lo. She hasn't watched it.
Halftime. I'm
not allowed to talk about it.
It's on my list. Don't talk about it.
The second thing I did, and this is something that I've had for a long time, I have a really straightforward net worth calculator. It's a spreadsheet. And I was actually telling someone about it the other day, and she was like, yeah, I know what assets minus liabilities are. But it is very much that. I literally have a list of all my assets, which is stuff that's going to hopefully make me money over time, and then all my liabilities, so things like mortgages, anything like that. And so I just went and filled it out again, knowing it was going to look pretty scary. But because I've done that, and I'm not religious about it. I do it every couple of months when I feel like it, and I can actually track. I've done it for the last couple of years, so I could actually track back and see that over time it sort of fluctuated a bit. And for me, that just knowing gave me confidence again, to being like, this is the deal. Like I have the information, and actually, to be honest, what I've done is roll back to September 2021. Like this is, I'm in the same financial position I was then. It is kind of weird to think I could have just like slept for the last 6 months, but then I realized no, because I've been doing stuff in that time, I probably would have gone further backwards. And then that led me to my third thing, which is like, I've had a plan. I've kept with my plan. Just keep with my plan. Like, it's just like, that's why you have a plan. So at times like this, you don't need to panic and change it. You've like, I know in the good times I planned for this. Keep investing money. keep doing what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and just like go watch some more JLo
Yeah.
documentaries. What about you?
Okay.
You're obviously not
No,
watching JLo
I am a
documentaries.
news junkie. I am a news junkie. So that's the first thing I do when I wake up. So I don't know. There's something about the drama of all the things that
I
happen
know,
in the world.
she's the one who sees me on
I
the
love
news.
it. I love it. I love it. I do love it. I love feeling, it makes me feel connected, both here in New Zealand and abroad. But how am I feeling about my portfolio? I was a little bit bummed, definitely in this period, because you always think, oh, what if I had sold in January and la la la. And look, lots of people did because that was their plan. But for my plan, I've invested for the long term, and so nothing in the meantime. If the companies themselves haven't changed, or there hasn't been any, so I just have to recognize this is just a little blip. And I did that human thing of, oh man, if I just timed the market right. But look, it's fine. I'm in for the long run. So,
but then I think just to clarify for
Yeah.
those, a couple of things there is, the first thing is I've learned the hard way is if you sell shares, the only thing you have now is cash.
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
unless you have a good reason to sell them, you actually still own those shares. And I think it's kind of like, it's hard to imagine when you just see the dollar figures, but you still own the same number of shares. So like if you've got the time to write it out, which you should if you're investing in the share market.
Yeah.
It looks a bit scary. You
Yeah.
have a wine, you have a chat about it, but
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't actually, as long as they're quality, you still back them.
No, but I'm
Nothing's
I'm probably trying, we're trying to scrimp together a little bit more money to invest now, because if you think about it, then, you've got quality companies and the share markets are on sale. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so we're trying to do that.
And I do think it's interesting because I think we've both had a similar reaction of just that little bit of anxiety.
Yeah.
But I talked to someone the other day and her opinion was so refreshing. She sort of walked in and she was like, oh, our plan this year is to work as much as possible because the share markets are down. So we're trying to, and I was like, it's so interesting because I'm used to having conversations about being afraid and having someone who is just like, this is the time. We're working hard.
It is great. KiwiSaver, what about that? What about?
Yeah, I don't really check out my KiwiSaver individually, to be honest, because I've been a contractor for most of my life. I haven't been adding much to it, so it's not a huge part.
Any tips?
Well, it is. Well, yes, absolutely. One tip is the 1st of July. Where are we at now? The 22nd of June. You have until the 1st of July to make sure you've put in that $1,042.
Yeah.
50, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And get that, maximize that government top up to like 50% top up.
Yeah.
Even if you can't hit that full $1,000, $1,042, every dollar you put into your KiwiSaver until the 1st of July, the government matches that. We have
free money.
It is free money. And there's, Google it if you haven't done it yet. Google it, and even though it might be scary to go look at your KiwiSaver, it's worth doing because it's free money.
I love it. And Tamsin Parker talks, she writes some great articles. I love Tamsin in NZ Herald. And it's really about don't panic with your KiwiSaver. Again, now is not the time to lock in losses and panic and change your KiwiSaver fund. So if you're in a particular fund for a reason, stick to your plan, but also be aware of what plan you're in and make sure it's right for you. But panicking and changing stuff is a really bad idea.
Well, and locking in losses literally means when you have money in a KiwiSaver fund, you are selling everything you have in that fund and then buying into a new fund at a much lower price. So it's, especially if you're changing from growth to a conservative, it actually has quite a lot of impact because you're sort of selling tangible things to buy other tangible things. Google it. Tamsin Parker sounds like a great recommendation.
Yeah, she's great.
The other thing, we went out for dinner the other night with Debt Free Diva.
Yeah,
and
Tracy, call out to Debt Free Diva. Follow her on Insta.
Yeah, and maybe give her a Google, because I don't think I'd realized this, that there are some great financial advisors out there whose job it is to help people find... She's investment advisor
at the moment.
Investment advisor, sorry. To help people find the right investments for them, but also to help them into the right KiwiSaver for them. And we had a really good chat about that. So it's worth having a Google if you're feeling really uncertain and you want to run it by someone. There actually are people out there, and that's their job. And I don't know if it costs anything for you. I don't know how they make their money, but it's worth having a look.
Yep. No, have a look. And there's some really great sites out there. Let's chat about, look, what are some things we should have sorted before investing? And we might chat later about some other things about like,
so I think you want to get out of debt and you want to build a safety net. So do you want to kick off the get out of debt thing? Or?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of the idea of good debt and bad debt. And so we talk about bad debt being the stuff that you have to pay a lot, like high interest on, high interest. So anything to do with credit cards would be considered bad debt. It's not something that will make you money in the future. It's just something that you owe, like a car possibly, that will depreciate in future if you owe money on a car. But good debt would be things that you invested in, but you know that that thing is going to grow
like
in value. A property, but also an education. Like getting a student loan, you're doing it because you know that you getting that loan is going to be worth more in the future.
You're investing in your career.
Yeah. So property and/or student loans are kind of viewed as good debt. So you want to make sure your bad debt is under control, but before investing. But also emergency fund. I think, especially in these times, like we're going into some scary times.
Yeah, and emergency funds kind of got a bad name for a while because people talked a lot about save 3 months of expenses, and that is so intimidating. And the way we look at it, and actually I think sorted.org.nz, they have a bunch of stuff about that on there about emergency funds. And one of the things that I think is just such a simple rule again is build up enough to cover sort of a common emergency. Like maybe if it's your phone breaking and you have to cover the $300 excess on your insurance if it's insured, your car getting maintenance, fridge. So it's like it could be as little as a couple of $100, and just to get that like basic safety net, and then you can kind of move on with your life and just keep every time you get paid
siphon some
I love to think about everything as just a path, and there's not like one destination. It's just you're getting closer and closer, you're building up more and more resilience. It's not you either got it or you don't. You're just building it up slowly over time.
And the reason I think we're talking about this because people put so many barriers to growing your money, and there's a huge reason for saving money. That's your short-term money, especially in this type of environment. If, for example, well, I don't know, if you need to get it cash for whatever reason, increased cost of living, all that stuff. So there's a reason for saving, but investing is actually putting your money to work, and your money is working for you. And I think the people put up so much barrier for putting your money to work, because when you put your money to work and invest it, you shouldn't get it out. Like this, like long-term money, right?
Just the same thing about sleeping nicely at night, sleeping soundly at night. Is if you've got your money locked away and you know it's working for you, and you know that you don't have to touch it anytime soon. Exactly the same as what's happening with the share markets now.
But don't you think? I think emergency funds. The reason why it's a thing. No, but I think what people are go. I can't do anything until I have my whole house in order. Yeah. And I guess why we're banging on about this is like if you just start a little bit of everything, that's not a bad place to be. So don't put up a bunch of barriers in front for start. Yeah,
everything's just a journey. Everything's you're getting one step closer. You can do a bunch of stuff in parallel. Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about, so we talked a little bit about saving short-term money, investing long-term money. It might be worth chatting about like how do you make money? So I'm putting my money to work. How the heck am I making money while investing?
Who knows now?
And we'll dive. Well, let's talk about. There's 2 ways we're doing it. Let's talk about it.
Then I'm back to September 2021.
Okay, you have a favorite approach, which you can talk about, and I'm going to take the other approach. And the reason that I invest is because I believe the companies that I invest in, I believe that their share price today is only going to go up. Now, of course, it's going to go down and up. That is the share markets. But I believe that the companies that I'm investing in, their share price is going to be, they're going to, grow and do better as businesses in the future. And so that share price is going to be, let's say I invested today at $50. In the future, it might be worth $500. So when I go to sell, and let's just say that investment is $500, I get to pocket that $450 just by investing. And so that's really simplistic, but that is one way that you make money, is that the share price goes up over time and you sell when it's higher and you get to pocket that difference.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that soon, but to make that sort of a bigger picture thing, you can invest in a company and hope it grows and expect it to grow because you've done the research. But as we'll talk about soon, you can also take that bigger into entire economies and presume they'll grow over time because you back them. So I agree. I have that philosophy
but
too. I just have some pets. And one.
Wait, what?
Like pet interest? They call it pets, don't they?
Who's they?
I don't actually have any pets, tragically. The other reason people invest is for income. And that income comes in the form of a dividend. And the dividend is quite simply when a company makes profit, they can choose to reinvest it in their own growth, which leads often to.
And I tend to invest in those.
Into an increased share price. But the other thing they can do is choose to pay it out to their shareholders. And it still blows my mind after almost 2 decades of investing that when you own shares in a company, you are a shareholder and therefore you are entitled to part of the profits if they choose to send it out in the form of a dividend. So dividends are not guaranteed and they are very much connected to profit. So even if you are have invested in a company that's paid a very consistent dividend for however many years, it still relies this year that they make a profit. So they do change over time. One of the things that it is worth having a look into is this concept of dividend aristocrats. And this is a particular index.
Yeah.
It's a list of companies who meet very specific criteria. And that is that they have to be one of the 500 largest companies listed on the US share markets, the S&P 500. They also have had to pay a dividend for at least the last 25 years in a row. And not only that, that dividend needs to have increased. And I think that's like 67 companies or something meet that criteria.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of ways to invest in them. You can invest in a fund that has them. You can invest in each individual company. But what I like about that is when you're investing for income, which in many ways, it's not the same as interest, obviously, but it is that sort of smaller payments out.
Yeah.
Again, interest is guaranteed basically, whereas dividends aren't. But that is one way, those dividend aristocrats, and I think they even have dividend kings, which are a much higher criteria even from that.
Yeah.
It's a way to sort of look at the kinds of companies that might be a lower risk way to invest.
They're kind of considered more blue chip, But actually, interestingly, to that point, is New Zealand Stock Exchange, the NZX, are New Zealand's kind of really known for companies that pay dividends. Companies that have been around for a long time, they're profitable and they share those profits. So a lot of Kiwis love investing in the share market here because of that. Whereas you would a lot would look over to the US for more of those growth companies, the companies that either are not profitable yet, tech companies taking a bit of a hit at the moment, or companies that are making profits but don't pay dividends because they're plowing it back into growth and kind of a bit of a land grab. So a little bit of a 101.
And I think in New Zealand as well, there are funds and companies. So you can check on the NZX, you can check companies and how much dividends they pay out. And also, there are funds that group together a bunch of dividend payers, which is kind of nice.
Love it. So let's jump in. So how many minutes are we? We're good. We're jumping into the core topic now. Speaking of core, let's introduce the idea of core and conviction. But I kind of like, if we were to start with a pie, and my share portfolio, my investing portfolio, is a pie, and I can choose what goes in that pie. And for simplicity's sake tonight, you can add a lot of things to that pie with respect to investments. But what we're talking about are individual companies and funds tonight. And we're going to really just hone in on those for simplicity's sake. And so you can divide that pie kind of how you want. You can have you can have the whole pie full of companies, you can have the whole pie full of funds. And I guess the approach is thinking of it as you get to determine what that mix is. Typically, actually, we'll talk about kind of risk and stuff in a minute, but we can talk about it on a scale and eggs. So like, go forth.
It's my newly invented scale
analogy. It's kind of literally 20 minutes ago. Go.
It's how my brain works, but I put it into words. So basically, there are two scales that are, gosh, this sounds complicated now, the inverse of each other. The first one is the egg scale. It's the egg scale. It's how many eggs you put in your basket. So you can put a very
sometimes these don't work. Sometimes they work. Go.
Okay. Well,
there's a scale. There's an egg scale.
So there's an egg scale, and you can put just a couple of eggs in your basket, or you can put a bunch of eggs in your basket. And as everyone who's ever had someone tell them about don't put all your eggs in one basket, you know that the smaller number of eggs in your basket is how much you're relying on each of those eggs. Whereas the more eggs you've got a lot more chances to succeed. So that's one scale. The other scale, you're throwing me, is the effort scale, which is the amount of research you have to do.
Okay.
So if you have a small number of eggs in your basket, you have to do a lot more research. If you have a lot more eggs in a basket, you might not have to do as much research on each one.
I got it. It'll come. It'll make sense. It'll make sense. So I guess what we're trying.
Doing an analogy again.
Because I'm like, where do the baskets come in?
This is what happens when she hasn't had a wine for a couple of months. She's halfway through.
Sorry. So after chatting with our hatchlings and kind of going through a lot of experts in the industry, how they kind of have this, they call it core satellite. We're like, boring. We call it core conviction. And how they usually separate it is they've got anywhere between 70 to 100% in the core. And we're going to get to that in a minute. And then they have from 0 to 30% in conviction. So that's kind of, just keep that in mind, that's just a general if you were to search that approach to how I build a portfolio, that is our approach, but you can actually tailor that scale however you see fit. And it kind of is based on risk, and we'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about the core. And this is where some people have, 100% in the core, and we'll talk about what that is, or they scale it right back to zero. But generally, it's kind of 70 to 100% of their kind of money that they're investing goes into core. Let's talk about what that is. That is spreading across lots of eggs in one basket. And that's typically done by exchange traded funds, ETFs, or funds in general. Let's just quickly demystify ETFs. Go.
Exchange traded funds is a name that I think immediately throws people off.
Yeah.
We hear EFTs, ETFs, those E things.
Yeah.
But if you actually think about the words, it's exchange traded funds. So they're traded on an exchange, which is another word for share market, and it's a fund. That's as simple as it gets.
And a fund is really a basket, another basket. Dang. It's a basket of companies.
Well, it's great. Eggs in a basket. A lot of eggs in that basket.
Great. It's a lot of eggs in a basket. So when you buy into a fund, you're basically spreading your money over every single company that's inside of that fund. And so the core, I guess the point of this is that the core is spread over hundreds, if not thousands of companies, which is diversification. So do you want to chat about that?
Yeah, I mean, diversification literally is spreading your eggs. Yes, having a lot of eggs that you spread your money across.
So KiwiSaver would be a good example.
A great example.
Yeah,
and even I think when we were talking before about sort of backing, one of the things with growth, investing for growth and having the share prices increase is that on an individual company level, you want the share price to increase. But with funds, what they allow you to do is for a whole group of investments, back that group of investments is going to increase in value. So some of the things that, some of the common funds and some of the most popular funds invest in companies across an entire share market. So you own a slice of every company in that share market. So you could own a slice of every company in the US share markets. You could own a slice of every company in the New Zealand share markets. And suddenly what you're doing is backing whether or not an entire economy is going to survive over the long term or grow over the long term.
Yeah. So, or if one economy, if we were to have some massive catastrophe in New Zealand, our little piece of our core might be hit in New Zealand. However, we've spread it out across the US and the rest of the world and developing countries. And so we're kind of buffered in a way.
Yeah. And the reason it's called a core, it's sort of your base. It's sort of the stable, probably not the right word, but the set and forget. It's I can just put money, like once I've picked, and there is I think we've got some tips coming up that you've jotted down on how to pick a fund or a couple of funds. Once you've picked them, they are fairly set and forget. You have to do a little bit of work doing that research. You should always know what you're investing in. You do that research, and then you actually can set it up that you just put an amount of money in that investment. Every time you get paid, you can top it up if you want to. And it's just that kind of, it takes it off your mind. It's just happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. Or you can lump sum it. I'm a lump sum investor, so I tend to build up cash over time if I can, where and when I can. And then I'll invest it all in one go.
I'm an absolute pay myself.
You're set and forget.
I'm a
pay myself first in KiwiSaver, but it's funny
you've invested it because I've never had a KiwiSaver properly. Well, I mean, I've had a KiwiSaver, but I've never had the employer benefits until So I do both. I do a combo. Yeah. So whereas for me, paying myself first has been critical and setting myself up how I have, which is the concept of every time I get paid, I literally immediately pay off my credit card because I have to, and then I funnel the same amount. It's before I do anything else. I funnel it into my investments and I just get it done, and then I spend or save or whatever I want to do with everything else, and I don't have to think about it because that money is safely put away, ready to grow. When I say safe, I always get nervous about using the word safe when it comes to investing, but it's put aside, and safe there is the sense of I'm not going to spend it accidentally. I'm not going to buy something. It's done.
No, I like that.
So, and
can I just say your approach is how I talk to my kids. For those that have kids, we pay our kids allowance. They have to do chores every week to do them, but they have to push money back to me at the end of the month. They have to push. So if we give them $10 a week, or whatever it is, I can't remember what we do, but Is that good? That's probably really
I like
good.
that you lie to how much we're paying our kids.
We probably do. We have automated payments to them, but also
Good.
equally
Hey, set and forget.
we've set and forget the payment to the children, the teens, I might add. They have to pay back to us, and we invest that money. So they're paying themselves first, and then when they get jobs, which is coming up this year, legal working age, they'll have to do. They're getting in basically the behavior that you've talked about, which I think is great. But I just happen to pay myself first with my KiwiSaver, and then
which makes a lot of sense.
I'm a lump sum investor with the rest of my stuff.
And I think, I mean, your KiwiSaver is an investment,
Yeah.
but I do think
Yeah.
a lot of us are a combo, which sounds like
Yeah.
we both are.
Yeah.
And I think the other little hot tip there is that sometimes you do get extra money, like you get given it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you do as an adult, but you win lotto. I don't know.
That'd be nice.
But when you get extra money, or people have a side hustle or whatever, it's that same thing of just like carve out a bit, and you're giving yourself a little bit of a bonus. You're giving your future self a bit of a bonus. And I know it's funny because I know a lot of, especially women we spoke to very early on at Hatch, was sort of like, I live for now, and kind of the future is uncertain, and I like buying stuff, and but it is really a thing about just like invest in yourself, and then go and buy the stuff. Like you can do both.
You can do both. So when it comes to the core, it's like, okay, well, what funds do I invest in? Of course, we can't say what funds, but if you were to Google, really common ways of how to invest, build an ETF portfolio or a common fund portfolio, where you're like, how do I spread my money over thousands of companies? There is actually a thing that's like a 2-fund portfolio and a 3-fund portfolio. So some of the resources I personally love are from The Balance. I think they do some great education. And so they've got like a 3-fund portfolio with The Balance, and then Charles Schwab, big company in the US, investment company in the US, also has like a 2-fund portfolio. And so that's just to, I guess the point here is not to tell you, you only need 2 or you only need 3 in your core, but it can be that simple. Like, and so an approach in New Zealand could be that you're investing in your local market. You could choose to invest in a fund that covers the New Zealand share market. You could choose to invest then in another fund that invests in the whole world without New Zealand. And so you could choose to do that. You could choose to add a third, which might be investing just in the US or something. And then the rest of it is other countries. So all to say that there are really big funds out there that capture most of the world. So you can keep it pretty simple, eh?
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other things that I would add to that is, nothing is worse. No strategy is worse than spending all your money. Like there is no worse strategy. So if that's what you're currently doing and you think you can set aside some money, you have the opportunity to learn and improve. And even if you muck up a few times, you're still better off than spending every cent. The other thing, another Netflix, no, it was on Amazon Prime. I was watching, I'm getting towards the finale of This Is Us, and it was a really sweet episode, and they were talking about the guy who invented the ability to send images to each other through the internet. And it just reminded me that one of the sort of myths around, this is how my brain works, one of the myths around sort of educating yourself around investing is it's really hard to come by this information. And I think they've just put up on the screen a couple of links, like, read those articles. They're like a 2-minute read. That's it. You can get from no knowledge to a lot more in like a couple of minutes with really plain English articles.
I think to your point, the invest in yourself first can just take 10 minutes a day, and it can be like, I subscribe to the Finimize, which I like, and Morning Brew and Hatch newsletter, of course, the Hatch Weekly. And I think between those 3, I'm getting really good coverage of all things investing, and that's enough for me personally. But you need to choose kind of what works for you.
Choose. And I think the other thing that might be a bit of a myth is that finance stuff is really boring. And I think there is like, the Wolf of Wall Streets and all that sort of stuff that sounds really weird, and there might be a real niche, but these organizations and these content providers, they know that that's a real niche. So their entire point is to make this content really interesting and engaging because they want to grow their audience. So they are motivated to put it in ways that people understand, that people find interesting. And you will actually find, like most things in life, that you think might be a bit boring and lame, when you actually give it a go, it might be quite a different world.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting, eh? Like if you think investing generally, you're kind of backing companies, which we're going to get to in a minute with conviction. But I just think even core, like recognizing that your share portfolio is invested in the world is pretty interesting. And that, you know, I'm investing in companies in India and China or wherever. It's pretty,
And I think
Brazil.
It was another shout out to Top Flight Investor. I think it was Top Flight Investor, who I follow on Instagram. And I think they put a post out really recently that it just so resonated with me, that if you're investing in, for example, the S&P 500, you have 500 of the most highly paid CEOs in the world's biggest companies working for you. And I just love that. I love the idea that you as the shareholder, they're all working for you now. And there's just something about that.
Maybe we should explain indexes. So if you're investing in funds, what they basically do is they track what's called an index, and they take, for the most part, they take the biggest companies of that particular country. And so in the US, you might have heard the term S&P 500. And so that is an index of the 500 biggest companies in the world. So if you want to invest in the US, they typically view, there's lots of different indexes in the US, but the S&P 500 is, they kind of call that the market because it makes up a huge percentage of the US market. So when any of those companies kind of, you know, their share prices move, the US markets, share markets in general tend to go up and down in correlation. So I just wanted to read out the top 10 companies in S&P 500, because I just thought this was interesting, recognizing that when you're investing in the US in something like an S&P 500, you are investing in the top 500 companies. So your money is being
the biggest 500 companies
in the world, in the US, publicly, I should say publicly listed, not private companies. But you've got Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Tesla, another Alphabet. We won't go into that. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren, we're going to get to him in a minute. Johnson & Johnson, if you've been jabbed, although we didn't get Johnson & Johnson jabs, we got Pfizer ones. United Health Group, that's got to be something.
I've never heard of United Health Group.
We're going to Google that after.
It's the 9th biggest company on the US share market.
I bet you if we Googled it right now, it'd have something to do with the pandemic. And NVIDIA, which is the little chips in probably many of your kind of computers and stuff. So look, I think it's important to recognize that a fund isn't like it is an index, and they're tracking how these companies are going. So you're still investing in companies, but it's just spread over the 500 or the 1,000 or the 2,000 that happen to be in that basket.
Well, and I think the other, when you say happen to be in that basket, this is something that you've put really nicely to me in the past, is that the great thing about index, these groups, is that they have rules. And when companies no longer meet the rules, they get the kick. So when you're new at investing and you're really worried about making a mistake, and you have this core strategy, and you're investing in a fund, and that fund has rules, that you can kind of rest a little easy knowing when a company no longer, it's sort of self-policing, when a company no longer meets the requirement, or an investment no longer meets the requirement, because there are some funds as well that invest in gold or in all sorts of other stuff. That it's booted out of the fund, so you don't have to manage it. You don't have to, which I think is pretty cool.
So that's that. Broad-based index is a very, some people even call it lazy investing. So again, you can have however much percent in kind of across a couple of funds, or however many funds as you want, but that is really the core. So let's get to conviction.
I do want to get to conviction.
We're going to get to it now.
I just wanted to say, lazy investing. Lazy investing is
it's great.
It is. It's funny.
Forget.
People think investing is all about fiddling with things all the time. But lazy investing is that's that set and forget. And I mean, we've done a bunch of research on day trading versus, and one of the stats that I thought was most interesting is any given day you have basically a 50-50 chance of a share price going up or down. It's basically a casino on any given day. If you invest for a year, I think it improves to something like a 70% chance that it will go, that you'll have grown, and then over 20 years you're at like a 97-98% chance that the investment would have grown. That's purely statistical. We've got an article. We've got an article. It's based on past statistics, and I just think that set and forget, that lazy approach is long term. It's that long term and lazy.
No, it's good.
I mean, coming from someone who went for a run today.
We're going to talk conviction now. Speaking of our convictions, is that you don't have to invest in conviction, because I just have to say it's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take a bit of research. You need to know what you're doing when you're investing in. No, you don't need to know what you're doing, but you need to set out to get to know and gain the knowledge in order to invest in conviction. And that's just because you're going to start to Consider things like individual companies or really specific funds. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the word thematic funds for tonight because they might follow a theme or a trend. And that's just the easiest way.
So that could be companies that have female leaders. It could be companies that invest in green,
cannabis,
it could be gold,
green energy, gold. Yeah. So if you're like, oh, I really know a lot about robotics or gaming or whatever, like you can find a fund that wouldn't be considered core because it's not spread over like huge swaths of the share market over the world, but it might be a really niche sector. And so if you're like, I really
crypto. Sorry, I'm still thinking of
crypto. There is a crypto
There's
fund.
a bunch of crypto funds.
Yeah, gaming, robotics,
space,
electric, space, you name it. So that would be what would be considered thematic and trend, and it would be classified as so funds are also classified as conviction as well as individual.
You believe that thing rather than the entire economy or the entire world is going to keep increasing in value.
Yeah.
Economies are going to keep growing. You believe specifically in one thing, and it could be one company or one industry or one up and coming industry or one area or one type of mineral is going to become more valuable.
So you would invest in that and so you would have a portion of your portfolio and what's like conviction. It's what you believe will grow over time. And so you're looking at the pioneers of the future, or this company going up over time. And so it's interesting when you talk to most people, even people that prefer to have most of their portfolio in really diversified, broad based kind of index funds, like you're gonna have people that invest in things that they know something deeply about or love, right? Yeah, like it's going to be possibly a tech company, or it's going to be possibly a bank or an airline. Like there's something that people are like, I know this company inside and out. And we're going to talk about how to get to know a company inside and out, but I've done a general level of thinking and research, and so I'm going to invest my money in that company and or trend to kind of grow.
And I think this is where being a shopper is actually quite an advantage, because you have brands that you back, you have things that you like, you spot trends,
or an edge.
You have an edge. Well, that's the other thing. You could be a shopper, or you could work in any industry actually. And I think as when we talk about investing in yourself, one of the things that I think it's really easy to forget when you become an expert at something is that no one else has the expertise, that you actually have a skill that other people don't know. So if you work in healthcare, for example, it might seem so common to you because you're surrounded by healthcare professionals and healthcare products.
But you know the products that you're using.
You know what's happening. I have no idea. I don't know.
So that's what they would consider an investor's edge, and we've shared a little blog on that one. But let's talk about
I think we're making our behind the scenes teamwork double time tonight.
Like they're like running quickly. This stuff.
Like this
it's
is
great.
not
I love
what
it.
You had that you told us you were talking about.
We love it. But common sense approach. Let's just chat. Where would we just even start with a company? Let's okay, we're going to carve out whatever percent of my portfolio is going to go into companies. I
want to start.
Yeah, go.
I want to start with things you're interested in.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the way I always start, and this was not a strategy that I knew that I was doing. It's just how it worked organically.
Yeah.
Is there's something that I find really interesting that I'm like, I really like this company and I like buying their stuff, or I see them in the news.
Dating apps. I mean, you read an article on Match.com and you were like,
are you trying to bring up
No, you're like, I use those products. I get those products. People are going to continue to date. And
am I right? Was I right?
I don't know.
I think there's a bunch of you see things and you go, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit more soon, but that idea of like, you've got your edge, you like your things, you're investing in it by shopping in it, you're investing in it by having a career in it, and you just have an interest in it. And the reason why I'm sort of banging on about that is I think that interest is key, because you do not want to do things. You'll never do things that you find boring. So if you're naturally interested in something,
you will want to learn more. You'll want to learn more. And so you'll want to learn things, or it'll be intuitive to you. How does that company make money? You know, how does it make money? Do they have competitors? You will be aware of their competitors. And what is the competitive edge? Like, what is it that makes that company the one that's going to win or actually maintain a bit of a lead in the market? And because we like, business wars and companies that win. We're all about winning. But
we are winners.
Yep. Yes, that too. So what is their edge? How are they differentiating themselves? What about their leadership team? That's really important. Do you buy into what the business is about, who their CEO is and their leadership team, things like diversity and inclusion, things like sustainability, things like, paying their employers equitably. These are all, that might be really important to you.
It could be. And this is where it gets a little bit controversial, because there are some big name CEOs who've built extremely successful companies. And I've had that moral dilemma a lot, where I really back them. Like, I back them to grow these companies. Would I want to be friends with them? No. And I think
but it is an investment. That's a good point. It's a good point, which is the most important thing with the company. Are they growing? And look, generally speaking, is the company going to be, are they on a track, or are they promising they're on a track to be making more money, being a bigger and better company in 10 years time than it is today?
Absolutely. And I think to that point about these, I'll say the word genius psychopaths, because I think that's what they are often. When you
sociopaths, there's a difference.
But when you look at the history of, like, especially tech companies, you look and there is sort of a playbook of how these companies have grown. But I think to your point about, like, do they pay people fairly? Do they do this? Do they do that? They are also a risk. They are these creative geniuses. They can make anything happen. But we also know, looking around, that there is, like, a change in what people expect, and human rights and all that sort of stuff. So all of this stuff becomes not only a really good way to make decisions, but a really interesting dinner party chat. If you're out with your friends, you start to actually have these conversations about like, is this company or is this thing the right thing? What are the trends happening in the world? What are your friends doing? What are they taking up running, or are they doing I've even noticed, like, things like, is it Peloton or something, and people were starting to go, oh no, I bike with this big screen. I had no idea. Like, all of that sort of stuff just becomes this really interesting conversation, out of which you learn a lot about, is the company on track to grow? What is their leadership like? Do their values fit in? It's a really easy, like, again, going back to the lazy way, you can do it in multiple ways. But being interested in it helps.
So speaking of someone who's really interested in investing, it would be weird not to talk about Warren Buffett, and I think we should. He is kind of described as the most successful investor of all time, and so he invests in companies, and so he's like, do not invest in a stock, a company, which is a share on the, they're kind of listed on the share market. That's their stock that you're investing in. Don't invest in them. Or how you might approach it is, would you buy that entire company? If you could, if you had enough money, would you buy that entire company? That is his approach. And he spends hours and hours and hours deep diving into these companies. So I thought it might just be interesting to go over very quickly, because it would be weird not to talk about ratios. And you will have heard of financial ratios. And so it would be interesting, the 6 key things that he kind of looks at, which I'm going to try and make sound quite simple. Ratios, people use them, and you can the great thing is, like, you can Google them and people do them for you. But the point of them is there's all sorts of ways to determine the health of a business. Like, is this business healthy? Is it being well run? And people tend to look to ratios to do that. You don't have to figure them out yourself. You can Google analysts that do it. But Warren Buffett loves it, because not only can he figure out the health of the company, he can figure out if it's expensive to buy it right now, if it's undervalued and it's cheap to buy it right now.
Hand in hand, right? And again, little shout out to Tom, Investing with Tom, who actually went to Berkshire Hathaway's AGM this year, flew over. So I would assume, I should have watched, he's probably done a whole bunch of content around that. So it's probably worth having a watch. But to me, the health and the price goes hand in hand. It's like doing your research in anything. If you're wanting to buy a designer pair of pants, you'd look up and go, is this brand worth the price? Is it good quality? And it's the same.
Can I just say Briscoes? Like, I'm sorry, when we moved to New Zealand, I was like, it was the weirdest thing. Why is there a store that, like, has these crazy sales all the time? Why would you go any other day? I'm sorry, it's weird. So approaching shares, maybe, is it on sale? Is it Briscoes, or is it like a Thursday and nothing's on sale? So who the heck goes into Briscoes? It's the weirdest thing, New Zealand. I'm sorry, it's so weird. You're like, just wait for Saturday, go back in 3 days. I'm like,
I think they've had a crunch on there, always on sale from regulators.
It is so weird. I'm sorry, but, like, Warren Buffett is looking for the Briscoe days. He's like, is this thing? And he uses ratios to do it. So I just want to go through his top 6 very quickly. And the first thing he looks at when he's looking at financial statements, which are so easy to find, by the way, we'll chat about that in a sec, but company performance. Has the company performed well compared to customers? Because the ratios kind of compare, well, how is this A company doing against B company? So it's like, don't overcomplicate it. It's basically a number that tells you, right, is this like a good number or bad number in the industry? So he's like, is this company performing well compared to its competitors? The company debt, how much do you owe? If a company, he doesn't like companies that owe huge amounts of money, because it just means they have less to plow into growth. And so he looks at company debt.
Well, and also they have less to plow into growth, but they're not resilient. It's sort of like building your safety
Oh, yeah,
net.
that's right.
It's the same as an individual
That's
safety
right.
net.
High
they have
debt.
less to plow into
Yeah.
growth,
Yeah.
but also if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
they don't have the ability to sit
Yeah.
through it or adapt or
Totally.
innovate.
Profit margins is the other thing he looks at. That's number 3. And that's like, it's kind of the profit is the money left over at the end that the company can then do what it wants with, either pay out to investors or it can plow back into growth as well. So he looks at that number that shows how much profit they have compared to others. Is it high, low, good, bad?
And we'll probably talk a little bit more about his views on tech soon. But like, for example, there are a lot, and tech's probably the biggest the group of this in general, of tech companies often are unprofitable for a long time. And you can look at that and go, that's a risk.
Yeah.
That is a risk. You don't actually make any money.
Which leads me to the last point, number 6, which is the company public. And the reason he likes public companies, and that's a company that is on the share markets, is because he can amass huge amounts of data on it. When a company's private, you know nothing about it.
They don't have to share anything.
They don't have to share anything. When a company goes public, that's when he can grab all of the information on it and kind of understand, does it have a solid track record? And so he's looking at that. So that's what a ratio does. The balance, again, has some great 101s on ratios. If you love to do that and you want to invest in a company, it might be worth looking at. Another handy tip.
You also don't necessarily need to do ratios to understand the information. Like, ratios are one tool, but you can actually just find the information out and compare different companies with different companies.
And the great thing is that, you can look, if you're interested in going to company annual reports and investing a big amount in them, you should. There are investor centers on websites nowadays for a company. They're so friendly. They have videos, they've got shareholder, like you can learn so much. And they're getting better at speaking like to us and to their investors.
Exactly the same as content creators. They want people to invest.
Exactly.
So they speak the language that they know. And the investing industry has gone through a huge change in the last few years. So they're speaking to more and more individuals like you and us. And they have to speak our language.
They're getting better. So you can go to their websites, their investor centers, and download all this information, crunch the numbers yourself, or there's fantastic analysts that do it for you. And so Google can be your best friend here. You can follow experts that follow and talk about that company in particular. If you just Google, is X company a buy? I'm not suggesting you do this to find out if you should, like, is it a buy? I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you is, let's say Wordle is a company, because like, I don't know, lots of people doing Wordle these days. Is Wordle a buy?
Are we still doing Wordle?
We are, but we're getting, like, would you invest in Wordle right now? Is it a fad?
Actually, that's a really great example.
Is it a fad? Would you invest in Wordle? Is Wordle a buy?
It's no dating app.
What you will find is 6 articles, I promise you, that come up with 6 different experts that you can just spend an hour or 2 or more on and just really get their sense of yes, no. And you have to do your own research and form your own opinions. But I'm just saying it's that simple, that a lot of people are talking about these things online. So I think we'll leave that with
a lot more.
We do. Well, of course we do. But the point is that conviction is, conviction takes a little bit more work, in that you've got to do your research. You need to use your edge. You need to use the internet.
And that's cool, because it can be really interesting. Again, do not use that as an excuse to put off starting, because like we've talked about a lot, you have your career edge, you have your shopping edge, you have your friends edge, you have all these things, and you have your interests. That it gives you a good start. You have the whole internet of information to look into. And you don't have to throw all your money at this stuff. Like we talked a lot about your core should be 70 to 100%, and your conviction could be 0 to 30%. You could start with $100 in a company that you like, that you believe is going to, that's all you need. Like, you don't have to.
Totally.
And everything's a journey. You start, you learn, you'll make some mistakes. You will make some mistakes. Just by the way, if you're just starting out,
But it is,
you will make mistakes.
I did hear someone say, because everyone talked about the retail investors and we're going through a crash and they're going to be hurting and la la la. And it's actually a really great time where you start to learn, is because you're understanding your risk tolerance, how comfortable you are. You're actually understanding what investing is. So I think like it's so great. It's so fabulous. The last thing I'm going to say on conviction, it doesn't have to be a company. We talked a little bit about earlier how it could be a really niche fund. And so you might not have to pick one company in gaming or robotics, but you could spread your money across a bunch or space. And so that's cool too. You don't have to kind of go down the rabbit hole of one company.
Or millennials. There's ETFs on millennials. Like it's whatever you're interested in.
And probably our age too. What are we? What are you?
I think I'm Gen Z.
You're probably not Gen Z. Just saying. So like we're gonna wrap up. So we are gonna invite people to search Wine and Wealth and subscribe, because you're going to get some really cool benefits.
Please do. And there's plenty more to come. And we've just got this fantastic team who are so into this, and they want to make Wine and Wealth into this great community. I mean, it already is. There's thousands of people already in it, but to really help us all talk together, open up these money chats. It's a pretty cool idea. And so help us make it happen. Get your friends on board, get your family on board. I was talking to a guy the other day on Instagram, and he's like, oh, my wife, I don't think she's really interested. She's the classic. She's the classic. And I was like, please bring her along. I'll name check her.
We hope you're here.
Yeah, I hope she's here. But I'll name check her next time.
You will get cool benefits, like even we'll give you a top up on Hatch to get you started. So make sure you do that. And
which is not nothing if you're just starting out. It's kind of nice to have a top up. You'll get the wine discount.
Yeah. And we've got a podcast, so talk about that quickly.
We now have a podcast.
As of tonight.
Launching our podcast. It will actually, one of the cool things that this amazing team has done is realize that anything that goes, I mean, this is technology, right? Anything that goes on video, Gen Z. So we're launching a podcast, and it's basically, it is at the moment just this.
Yeah.
But you can listen to it when if you're like me, going for a run, or if you're like cleaning your house, and so you don't have to be sitting down and watching us beautifully lit and yet still apparently looking quite shiny. You can listen to it, and which we think makes it more accessible for people. It's
totally
hoping to add heaps more. As always,
you find it on Spotify. Find it on Spotify.
Find it on Spotify.
That.
What is it called? Wine and did they
Wine and Wealth.
Wine and
Wealth. Yeah, put it up on Spotify. And we want your feedback. We do really want to get better as a duo here as we do this. So there will be. We're linking a survey in the chat now. So tell us your thoughts of how you found it, and we'd really invite those. So
and thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
And if you're watching after the fact, thank you for watching after the fact or listening. Our podcast.
Yeah. Thanks all. We'll see you again next time at Wine and Wealth. Take care. Ka kite.
Cheers.
I'm actually in debt.
You did quite well.
I'm in debt at the moment.